Lydia Harrington signed the marriage contract, while the room quietly laughed at the man beside her. 30 seconds later, every phone in the room started ringing. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" The registrar's voice cut through the silence, quiet, but heavy enough to make the room feel smaller. Lydia Harrington didn't answer. Her fingers tightened around the pen until the pressure turned her knuckles pale. The fluorescent light above flickered faintly, buzzing like it was struggling to stay alive. The air smelled of paper, dust, and judgment. She could feel it. Every pair of eyes in that room pressing into her back. Whispers she didn't need to hear to understand. She's lost her mind. What could they have threatened her with? Why would someone like her agree to this? Lydia didn't turn around. If she did, she might hesitate. And hesitation wasn't something her family allowed. So she lowered the pen and signed. Lydia Harrington, heiress to one of the most powerful legacy empires in the country, had just married a man in a worn jacket and scuffed boots. A man no one in that room respected. A man standing beside her with a calm that didn't belong there. The quiet laughter started almost immediately. Subtle, controlled, cruel. But Lydia didn't react. Because this wasn't a choice. It was a transaction. Then, just as the man beside her reached for the pen, every phone in the room began to vibrate. Not one. Not a few. All of them. A strange ripple moved through the crowd. Hands reached into pockets. Screens lit up. Expressions shifted. Confusion. Then disbelief. Then something colder. The financial markets had just moved. Something massive. Sudden. Unexplainable. A name, buried for years, had just resurfaced. Lydia didn't look at her phone. She looked at the man beside her. Lucas Shaw signed his name without hesitation. No reaction. No emotion. Just quiet certainty. And somehow, he looked like the only person in the room who already knew why everything had just changed. The Harrington estate had always felt less like a home and more like a system. Lydia understood that long before she had the words for it. Every corridor, every polished surface, every carefully chosen piece of art, it all existed to reinforce one idea: control. And Lydia had been raised to fit perfectly inside it. The call came on a Tuesday morning. "Come to the library," her father said. Nothing more. He didn't need to explain. When Lydia walked in, Edward Harrington was already seated behind his desk, composed as always. Catherine stood near the window, arms folded, watching the gardens like this conversation didn't concern her. Victor sat off to the side, swirling a glass slowly, as if he already knew how this would end. "Sit down, Lydia." She did. There was no build-up. No softening. "The company is failing." The words landed clean. Precise. 3 bad investments. 1 leveraged acquisition collapsing under its own weight. And a silent withdrawal from a key partner that had left them exposed in ways reputation couldn't fix. In 6 weeks, Edward continued, "We lose everything." Lydia felt it then, that subtle shift beneath certainty. Not panic. Not yet. But something close. "There is one solution." She held his gaze. "What kind of solution?" Victor answered this time, not looking at her. "An arrangement." Lydia already knew. But she asked anyway. "With who?" "A man named Lucas Shaw," her father said carefully. "He's willing to stabilize our position." "At what cost?" A pause. Then, "Marriage." The word didn't echo. It settled. Lydia looked between them. No one disagreed. No one softened it. "The price," she said quietly, "is me." And no one in that room told her she was wrong. Lucas Shaw lived 20 minutes outside the city. Not far enough to escape it, just far enough to be forgotten by it. Lydia noticed the difference immediately. The streets were quieter. The houses smaller. Real. Not curated for appearance, not designed to impress anyone who didn't already belong there. His house sat slightly back from the road, a modest place with a faded green door and a porch that leaned just enough to suggest time had passed through it honestly. No gates. No guards. No performance. She stood at the entrance for a moment longer than necessary, her suitcase beside her, as if waiting for something to feel familiar. Nothing did. Lucas opened the door and stepped aside. "Come in." No ceremony. No expectation. Inside, the space was simple. Clean. Lived in. Warm, in a way she didn't trust yet. Then, a small figure appeared in the hallway. A girl. 8, maybe 9. Watching Lydia with open curiosity, like she hadn't been taught to hide what she felt. "Hi," she said. "Are you staying here now?" Lydia hesitated. "For now." The girl nodded, accepting it without question. Then she glanced at Lucas. "She's pretty," she said, matter of fact. Lucas didn't react. "I know." Lydia looked away. There was no judgment in the room. No calculation. And somehow, that unsettled her more than anything else. Lydia didn't trust environments that felt calm. Calm, in her experience, usually meant something was being hidden. So she started paying attention. Not openly. Not in a way that could be seen. But the way she had always worked, quiet observation, pattern recognition, waiting for inconsistencies to surface. Lucas Shaw was full of them. It began with small things. He woke before sunrise. By the time she stepped into the kitchen, coffee was already made. Breakfast was prepared. Not presented, not announced, just there. Like it had always been expected. He never asked her where she was going. Never questioned her schedule. Never tried to impose anything on her. That should have made things easier. It didn't. Then there were the details that didn't belong. One afternoon, during a call about a restructuring deal, Lydia spoke too freely, out of habit. She didn't realize Lucas was within earshot. Until he spoke. "The model only works if their yield assumptions hold," he said calmly, not looking at her. "If they're off by even half a point, the entire structure collapses." Lydia went still. That wasn't guesswork. That was precision. She turned to him slowly. "Where did you learn that?" Lucas rinsed a glass, unbothered. "Picked it up somewhere." And just like that, he walked away, leaving behind something Lydia couldn't ignore anymore. A pattern. And the growing certainty that nothing about him was accidental. The collapse didn't happen slowly. It happened all at once. Lydia saw it in the numbers first, sharp movements that didn't make sense unless someone had forced them. Credit lines tightening. Partners pulling out. Positions unraveling faster than they could be stabilized. By noon, the calls started. By 3, the truth was undeniable. The Harrington empire was breaking. Her father's voice, when he finally reached her, sounded unfamiliar, stripped of the control he had built his life around. "It's over," he said. Lydia didn't argue. She spent the rest of the day trying to find something, anything that could hold. Calls unanswered. Messages ignored. Advisors speaking in careful language that all meant the same thing. There was no way out. By evening, she stopped pretending there was. She sat in the quiet of the house, the weight of it pressing in, everything her family had built, everything she had been raised to protect, slipping beyond recovery. The door opened behind her. Lucas stepped inside, Mia's voice trailing somewhere down the hallway. He looked at Lydia once and understood enough not to ask the wrong questions. "Bad day," he said. She let out a breath that didn't feel like relief. "It's falling apart." He studied her for a moment. Then, quietly. "Sometimes things do." Not dismissive. Not careless. Just certain. And somehow, that certainty made the silence feel heavier. Lydia didn't sleep. By morning, the situation hadn't improved, it had hardened. What was unstable yesterday was now collapsing with intent. She sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, numbers refreshing in real time as if watching something bleed out slowly. Then, a shift. Small at first. One creditor position, stabilized. Then another. Lydia frowned, leaning closer to the screen. This wasn't market correction. This was intervention. Deliberate. Precise. Expensive. Within minutes, the pattern became undeniable. An entity, anonymous, layered behind holding structures, was buying out exposure, restructuring liabilities, sealing fractures before they could widen. Whoever was doing it knew exactly where to act, and had the power to do it instantly. Lydia's pulse slowed, not from relief, but from recognition. This wasn't luck. This was control. She looked up. Lucas was in the kitchen, pouring coffee like nothing in the world had changed. Like global financial pressure wasn't shifting in real time. Like someone wasn't quietly rewriting the fate of her entire family. "You're seeing this?" she asked. He glanced at the screen briefly. Yeah, that was it. No surprise. No curiosity. Just acknowledgement. Lydia studied him, really studied him this time. The calm. The timing. The precision. Then the realization settled in, cold and unmistakable. This wasn't happening around him. It was happening because of him. Lydia almost didn't go. Events like this had always been routine, predictable rooms filled with predictable people, all performing versions of power they wanted others to believe. But this time was different. This time, she walked in knowing something she couldn't yet prove. The ballroom was already full. Familiar faces turned as she entered. Conversations paused just long enough to acknowledge her presence, then resumed, quieter, sharper. And then, their attention shifted. Not to her. To him. Lucas walked beside her in a dark suit she had never seen before. It fit too well. Moved too easily. Like it belonged in rooms like this. No one laughed this time. No one whispered. They watched. Measured. Adjusted. A man Lydia recognized immediately, Oliver Kent, approached with his usual polished confidence. The kind that had never been challenged. "Lydia," he said smoothly, before his eyes flicked to Lucas. "And this is my husband," Lydia said, steady. Oliver smiled. Thin. Dismissive. "Right. I heard. Didn't realize we were expanding into mechanics." A few quiet laughs. Lydia felt it, that familiar instinct to smooth things over. But this time, she didn't. Instead, she stepped closer to Lucas. "Careful," she said calmly. "You're speaking about someone you don't understand." The room shifted. Subtle. Immediate. Oliver's smile faltered, just slightly. "And Lucas?" He said nothing. But Lydia felt it. The moment something changed. Not in the room. In her. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe so you never miss a story and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're listening.